Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. My husband, Matthew, and his brother, Gabriel, were always the pranksters, the best friends, and the partners in crime. I've never had a problem with that, or never seen anyone else have a problem with that, because at least initially, their jokes and pranks have never been out of line. With so much validation and so much attention from everyone, they never stopped with their pranks and eventually they just kept worsening. They've been pranking people since they were in school, following all throughout college where we met, and according to his friends and family, it was always their pranks that always lit up their family events and their lives in general. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find them funny either. There were times I'd be holding my stomach laughing with their amazing sense of humor, their pranks, and their ability to entertain the crowd wherever they went, whether that be at a wedding, in a club, at a birthday party, everywhere. But everything has a limit. And unfortunately, Gabriel and Matthew started to soon cross theirs. I guess the validation that came from it got to their head because their pranks eventually started to take a dark turn. Their pranks stopped being so funny once we all graduated. I'm not sure what it exactly was that changed everything, the adulthood hitting us the way it did, the lack of validation, or simply just Matthew and Gabriel's inability to grow out of that phase. They reached a point from where their pranks just started getting worse and worse. And instead of them leaving a smile on people's face, they started to leave tears streaming down someone's cheeks. I still vividly remember the first prank they pulled that just screamed, "Okay, now this is too much," to me. It was at that moment when Gabriel proposed to his girlfriend, Anna. The proposal went as normally as it possibly could, but it was the way that Matthew presented a slideshow with fake screenshots of Anna cheating was the true shocker. Matthew and Gabriel are great actors, so with a serious, tense look on their faces, they started confronting Anna, and the poor girl was in hysterics. I was in utter horror when I found out it was a prank, and honestly, I should have left Matthew there and then because eventually, even I became the victim of their sickening pranks at my own wedding. Every time things like these would happen, it was Matthew, my mother in law, Gabriel themselves who would go out of their way to spoil me and bring me out of my rage. Young, naive me always fell for their tactics. This time was different, though. It was my best friend Rita's wedding last week, and I genuinely believed that everyone knew how important that day was for me. Rita is my childhood best friend, and she had contributed immensely for my wedding. So I just knew that I had to do the same for her because that would only be fair. I left a week before and flew over to her city, which is a couple of hours away from mine, so that I could help her with the last minute preparations. All the events leading up to that, things were as normal as they possibly could with Matthew, who couldn't join us because he had to attend a work party. It was the same for Gabriel, who even went ahead and dropped a congratulatory message to Rita. So, what can go wrong here, right? I had thought that to myself as well, but it wasn't until the wedding day arrived itself that things went terribly wrong, and that too, all because of Gabriel and Matthew. It was the morning of the wedding. I was inside Rita's hotel room getting her ready as my phone suddenly started buzzing like crazy, and I saw it was Gabriel. So I picked up his call. I had already become nervous because Gabriel never called me that many times before. Well, on the other side of the call, I was greeted by a very drunk Gabriel who was in absolute panic, talking about how on their way back from a party, Matthew was too drunk and got into an accident. My stomach dropped. I immediately knew I had to run. Through my tears, I told Rita everything I possibly could about the situation. Rita, being the angel that she was, immediately booked me a cab, an urgent flight, and I reached back to my city within 4 hours. I bolted to the hospital and inquired about my husband at the reception and was surprised when their records didn't show anything. I then received a call from Gabriel that I think changed me forever. It was him and my husband in the background in absolute hysterics, laughing that they had pranked me. My world came shattering down. I immediately booked a cab back home and was greeted by Gabriel, Matthew, and God knows how many men and women. This man had gone out of his way to party in my house without telling me about it, and the only reason why he pulled this sickening prank on me was so that I could come home and clean up ASAP. No one laughed except for Gabriel, Matthew, and Matthew's colleague, Ness, who I knew the joke was meant for. I just knew I couldn't stay in this house anymore because not only had my trust broken, but this house no longer felt like mine. I simply left. I booked a flight back to Rita's City. It was a lot of money spent in a single day, but I knew this day wouldn't come back. I missed the wedding, but luckily made it back in time for the reception. I had a blast. Of course, while having my phone blasted with texts from my in laws and Matthew to just chill and come back home, I knew I wasn't going to chill because I was done with this man. The very next day, I flew back to my home city and moved into a friend's house. I also went to my house when Matthew was at work to collect some of my important belongings. The next thing I did was book an appointment with the lawyers and got the divorce papers drafted. That was my version of prank towards Matthew. I didn't have time to keep bullshitting around and doing childish things like him, so as soon as the divorce papers were handed to me, I met him up and handed it to him. Apparently, this took Matthew and his entire family by surprise because they were surprised by the fact that I could no longer take jokes. They even got my whole family involved, and suddenly they're on Matthew's side too. I feel really lost here right now. My friends say I've done the right thing, but with my family completely switching their sides, I'm really questioning my decision. AITA? My suspicions were right because today none other than Ness herself messaged me. It was a long paragraph starting off with apologies for ruining things between Matthew and I. I immediately knew where this was going, so didn't really bother to read the entire thing, but to put it in short, mostly all it talked about was how Matthew had been already spreading rumors that his own marriage was on the verge of getting over. He used this information to manipulate and butter Ness into sleeping with him. Ness and him worked together, and although she wasn't ever my favorite person due to her being very insensitive, I gave this one to her because I know she's not as stupid to message someone like me a bunch of lies who's already enraged to the max. I wouldn't blame Ness for all of this, but meh, I'd be lying if I didn't feel hurt by her actions as well. I decided to screenshot her message and forward it to all the group chats I shared with Matthew. These groups started blowing up once again, the only difference being that everyone has started to realize just how bad Matthew has and always had been messing up. I guess a lot of his pranks also started to ick people suddenly because I can see messages after messages of people talking about him and how inconsiderate he was. Matthew, Gabriel, and my in laws cannot be angrier at me currently because of all the trouble I'm putting them into, but honestly, I also cannot care about them any less. I was surprised when Anna reached out to me personally today. Initially, I thought she wanted to blow up at me, just as my in laws were, but to my utter surprise, it was for something completely unexpected. We decided to meet at a local restaurant. The initial few minutes were spent talking about things here and then. Eventually, when the awkwardness wore off, Anna confessed to me that after this situation, she believed that she had fallen out of love with Gabriel. I was shocked, heartbroken, but at the same time, sort of relieved. She went on the day that she had overheard Gabriel talking to Matthew and confessing to the fact that he had known about Matthew's affair from the get-go, but still decided to keep it as a secret for him due to some bro code. I was honestly disappointed because even with their pranks, I expected so much better from Gabriel and Matthew both. With everything that Anna confessed, I had nothing to say but encourage her to do what is right. Thankfully, the right thing for her was to file for divorce. This all was still surprising to me, but at the same time, not so much because this wasn't the only event that caused Anna to take this firm step. She and I both know how terrible Gabriel and Matthew have been all these years. I guess this situation was just the nail on the coffin for her. Hi all. I had posted on this subreddit a couple of months back. I stopped updating this post because I had become caught up with all the legal proceedings and stuff that came with the divorce. Well, the divorce is still ongoing. It is pretty much smooth, though. The only thing that has been difficult is moving on from this situation. I mean, regardless of how much I hate this man now, I know there was a time when I had loved him more than anything in this world. It is that part that I know will take a lot of time to get over. Unfortunately, I haven't reached that point yet. But with good things starting to reap from the seeds I had sown by moving away from Matthew, such as moving into an apartment with Anna, making friends, clubbing, doing yoga, baking, and getting a new cat, I think the day that I get over it all isn't too far, and I would like to thank you all for helping me get to this point, really. NTA. Matthew seems like he's having some identity crisis and is trying to once again live the frat boy lifestyle or something. It's very cringy, and I'm glad OP ran away as far as she could. NTA. If this is only the overview of the terrible behavior Matthew and Gabriel have pulled, I can only imagine all that OP and Anna had to endure with these guys. I have older siblings. My mom had an affair on her first husband, and that's how my younger brother and I were born. My parents couldn't afford daycare, so my older sisters were pretty much forced into taking care of us. Flash forward some years, and my oldest sister, we'll call her Catherine, got a boyfriend, and my mom was very jealous and said horrible things about him. Then, when Catherine, who was well over the age of 18, told my mom that she would be moving in with her boyfriend, my mom went ballistic and made it like she was selfish for not staying and taking care of my brother and I. My mom said that pretty much she wasn't welcome over and didn't want her seeing us, which cut me off from my sister. This devastated me at age 11 because I was very attached to my sister. To make matters worse, my mom ended up getting into my sister's email and read all the emails her and her boyfriend had exchanged to each other and printed them. She read them with my other older sister, we'll call her Cindy, and even showed them to my grandparents and twisted stories to turn my grandparents against her. For years, my mom and Catherine did not talk, but my mom called her in 2018 to apologize. Now, flash forward to 2022, and Catherine is living her absolute best life, still with her husband, and they've done very well for themselves, just overall very happy and financially well. Well, Catherine brought up a rumor she was hearing from someone else in the family about her husband and my other older sister, Cindy, and I immediately knew where it had came from and what she was talking about. See, when I was age 13, my mom found condoms in Cindy's closet, and because Cindy didn't have a boyfriend or go places much besides my sister's house to hang out with Catherine and her husband, she jumped to the conclusion that Cindy was having an affair with Catherine's husband. I didn't believe this to be true even at age 13, but my mom went and ran this rumor to my dad and others. So I told Catherine all of this. I clarified how the rumor started and that mom was who started it years ago. Catherine warned me she would confront our mom, which I was fine with. And what did my mother do? She denied everything. She says I'm lying and my father just backed on it. Now my mom was diagnosed with MS this year. My mother will call Catherine and say how she doesn't know how they're going to pay the bills, etc. And Catherine has helped them numerous times, giving them thousands of dollars. Well, Catherine found out more stuff our mom did in the past, and our mom freaked out, which caused my dad to send me a nasty text saying that my mother has a serious health issue and that she does not need the stress I am causing her and that I need to stop with the drama, and how disappointed he was in me, which caused us to fight. And when my aunt called my mother to confront her on both Catherine's behavior and mine, and our mother told my aunt I was crazy not to believe me. NTA, OP, your mom is a bad person. If she didn't want to experience consequences for her horrible abuse of your sister, she shouldn't have committed those acts. Consider telling your mom how you really feel about her and distancing yourself from her entirely. Your dad has enabled your mother's behavior all these years. He's also a bad person. NTA, your mom is a bad person. She happens to have MS. Having a serious health disorder does not make her into a good person or make everyone obligated to let her behave so badly. Since your mother is hell-bent on creating drama within your family, it would be best if you and your siblings went NC or LC. It's not healthy for anyone to participate in her nonsense. She was a bad person before she got sick, and she is still a bad person. Nobody should feel obligated to help her out financially. Let her figure it out for herself. Your father was complicit in enabling your mother's bad behavior. He's not a good guy. You're all abused in some way, and the best thing for you to heal is to cut her off. Therapy would be a really good idea, and possibly some extra therapy with your siblings so you can support each other. I am so sorry for the pain and turmoil you must be feeling. Your mom is toxic. She doesn't take motherhood, marriage, or vows seriously. And now that she's sick and going to need a lot of care and money, she's going to use up and discard each of her children. But she won't stop talking badly about any of you while using you. She can't, even if it's for her own good. As soon as you can, you have to move out of that house. Do not get stuck there for years being her caregiver. It will destroy you mentally and physically. NTA. I care for an elderly lady, 93, let's call her Mary, who has lost almost all of her vision. As a younger person, she loved gardening. She had a huge yard and even grew some of her own vegetables. She recently moved into an apartment with a small balcony. Between herself and family, they have gotten her a few herbs, flowers, and other plants. The idea was to have a garden that she can identify by smell. Her son, let's call him John, wanted this to be their thing. He was going to help her plant them in pots and also make a little vertical garden with the herbs from old pallets. This was probably a year ago. In the meantime, the plants have started dying and or being infested with bugs. They are still in the plastic containers they were bought in. This has been a great heart sore for Mary as she's been patiently waiting for John, who is currently unemployed, to help her sort it out. This is where the issue comes in. I let John know that his mom and I were going to go to the nursery, get some new plants, and work on the garden. I asked him if he wanted to come with, and we would make a day of it. The message was read, but I got no reply. I took that as a not interested. Mary and I went to the nursery, had a great time picking new plants, getting fresh potting soil, and other bits that we would need. When we got home, I chucked the infected, dead plants and some of the clay pots to repot what could be saved. I didn't get to finish as it was a lot of work, but told Mary that we would finish it the next day. That evening, I got a very angry text from John. He was furious that I had thrown out the plants that he had bought. He told me that he was busy working on a vertical garden for the herbs. He wasn't, and that he was going to use the clay pots for something else. I was told to not touch the garden again. He got all the plants out of the refuse bag, popped them back in the plastic pots, and shoved the new plants to the back. It has now been 3 weeks. The new plants are dying. The old ones are sticks in soil, and there is no vertical garden. Am I the a-hole? John was a late baby and is in his later 40s. He is going through a tough time being unemployed and in a toxic relationship. NTA. Is he getting dementia? I would consider secretly replacing the dead plants with the same, but live ones, so he will have his miracle and maybe be less of a sad sack. NTA. As a balcony gardener, it makes me really sad for all those plants to go to waste. Have you thought about a windowsill herb garden? I'm currently growing some herbs using a light with a timer next to my window. The light helps for days when it's not sunny. I even have mine in mason jars using hydroponic methods, so there is nothing I have to do other than add more water every now and then, and change the water entirely every 2 weeks.